Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you for joining me. Let's get talking about your psychology, your daddy issues, to the extent that you still feel connected with your father even though you're older than 15 and a half. Boy, why would I be talking about it this week, huh? I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on. Doesn't matter to me. And I really mean that. I don't really care. That's like something that you'd think a therapist would say to make him seem more congenial, just a man of the world, more cosmopolitan. Oh, I don't care, I'm above the election. I really am. And the only reason I am is because I'm better than you. Well, let's get into talking on why or how you can be better than everybody else like I am. And I think that is by managing your father issues. This election, I think I brought up a lot for people. Yeah, what was I talking about? Whether you're on the left or the right. You're either too happy by any victory that may be happening. I'm not even sure if there's a real victory yet. This is Thursday morning. There might be one by tomorrow, which would be Friday when you're watching. Or whether you're upset that your guy lost. If it really matters to you that much, I think this is less of an issue with politics and more of an issue of your psychology and the importance that you place on that. The importance you place on this thing that you think is an authority figure and how you think this affects you, right? This is how the father issue manifests. Another way that it manifests is wanting, well, this is a mother issue too. This goes back to all parent separation, is wanting comfort. You know, if you go to the gym for 2 weeks and you're not seeing the results that you want, because you don't never see results in 2 weeks unless you just starve yourself, then you'll see results. Then your body will transform, probably not in the way that you want, and your metabolic functions won't transform in the way that you want if you do that. But you know, you go to the gym for 2 weeks and it's fun, but you're not really seeing results, so I'm just gonna go, drink a beer and watch television or go back on my phone. Right? Just difficulty with not getting something right away. I said comfort. Maybe it's just delayed gratification. Difficulty with delayed gratification. But why would you have difficulty with delayed gratification? Because you want to regress. Because that regression function is very powerful. We call that around here the secondary emotional payoff. Why would you partake in a neurosis? To get a certain feeling state. I mean, this seems like a silly analogy, but this is literally what's going on, and I use that word literally. Why would a drug addict be knocking on his drug dealer's door at 3 a.m., waking up the entire neighborhood? Why would he be partaking in behavior that is that dysfunctional? It doesn't make any sense, right? Well, you put the drugs in there. Oh, he's a heroin addict. Oh, that's what he wants. He wants that emotional fix. Why would you be sabotaging your life? Why would you not only create a deficient relationship with reality, but continue that? Why would you not change it? You're not that dumb. Even if you're pretty dumb, you're not that dumb to be doing the same thing over and over again, stuck in the same neurotic loops. Why would you be doing that? Oh, well, there's this drug. Well, I'm not a drug addict. Yeah, you are. There's a payoff there. So if you really want to go for that regression or the payoff of the regression, because you go to the gym for 2.5 weeks and I don't really see the results, or now I'm on Instagram looking at this influencer guy. Sorry for using that term, influencer. I'm looking at this guy, I just don't have the upper pec development, and I never will because of genetics. I'm going to tune out. Okay, that is a father issue. I would argue that is the father issue coming up for you. I have a bunch of videos on. There's a couple months ago, I think I did a video on daddy issues, and I used Fresh Prince of Bel-Air as an example. Hey, guess what show I was watching that week? But I think another example of daddy issues, placing too much importance on the election one way or the other. But I think another example of the daddy issue that I think a lot of guys experience very concretely is arguing with your dad over politics. Not that you have to believe everything that your dad believes, of course, but if it really bothers you, why does it bother you so much, particularly your dad, right? What is going on there when your dad, if he differs politically or if he voted for a different guy than you voted for? Okay, you can talk to him, you can argue with him. I want you to stand up to your dad and let him know exactly what's going on with you. political views included. I think that's a very small part, but okay, that counts, I guess, as talking with your dad. Yeah, I mean, it's just funny to see people on Twitter, and they base these accounts on, oh, I used to be a liberal or leftist, and now I'm conservative. Join me in my journey, or vice versa, right? I used to be a conservative, now I'm a liberal leftist. Join me in my journey. It's like, dude, you just changed in the least essential way possible. I am more impressed if you change your style after you turn 32 than if you change your political beliefs. And people don't change that. I know it's such a low bar, but that's not real change. I mean, if you go for intense advocation for one group to intense advocation for another, like, dude, it's just a lateral move. You're doing the same thing. And you're probably using both, I would argue. You're probably using both for the same destruction, from your own issues, from your own, I would argue, daddy issues. So Ryan Holiday, Stoic philosopher, Stoic interpreter philosopher, you get issue 1 of the magazine. I interviewed him. We talked about Stoicism, and there is a disagreement there about Stoicism. I mean, you can get the magazine and read it. I guess we'll get into it. But man, looking back, I used to think that argument mattered. Whether Stoicism, okay, so the Greeks adopted Stoicism, whether their adoption of Stoicism led to the downfall of Greek civilization. I think that was my point in 2012 when we had that interview. Or whether the Greeks adopted Stoicism to deal with the overcoming, the growing, the burgeoning Roman civilization that was essentially this tyrannical dictatorship that took over. A tyrannical dictatorship, somewhat benevolent, not completely egregious, but of course they had their own Holocaust. But the Holocaust 2,000 years ago, any Holocaust was just called Thursday. Those things just happened all the time. So yeah, if you are still arguing with your dad and it still bothers you and you get in this hissy thing, it's fine, right? It's fine, I get it, but that's just an indication that there's still attachment issues with your father. Why? Because why else would you care so much? Because your dad is a reflection of you. Your dad is this authority figure in your life, which again, if you're older than 15, sorry. You got to at least begin the separation then. Your dad's this authority figure in your life. It means something to you. It means something whether Trump or Biden wins. Looks like it's Biden now of Thursday morning, which the one thing I will say about the election is, so people on the right, and this is predicted, people of the right are saying it's voter fraud. Maybe it is. And I definitely wouldn't be against either party committing voter fraud. But how about before you make those claims, we see some evidence? Is there evidence out now? I mean, I'm open to that argument, by the way. I think I'm probably going to get a lot of pushback on, oh, you don't care about the election, you don't care about voter fraud. No, I do. I want to see evidence. I'm open. I wouldn't put this past either party again. But yeah, you're still attached to the father. His opinions are somehow reflected on you. It's a reflection of you because you haven't separated properly. You haven't formed that boundary with him. And so it matters to you. And I think this is very interesting that this is Ryan Holiday, who I like. He's a Stoic guy. I have huge issues with Stoicism. Whatever. You're out there, you're reading a bunch of books. I'm guessing it's probably not a huge range of books, but a bunch of books. You're making the effort. You came to Stoicism. It makes sense. It's understandable why you would stumble on Stoicism given culture. We'll get to it. I think you're incorrect, but you're probably a good guy. So this isn't any criticism of him. This is just an acknowledgement of what happens when you don't manage your issues, when you don't manage the father issue, when you don't look at archetypal ways of you functioning in this world and what you need to do to be in touch with reality. If you wanted to build a railroad, would you just read a Seneca and say, I'm just going to cut out my emotion and focus on this and not care about anything else? Or would you pick up a book on chemistry and go, how do you make steel? What's up with steel? Hey, what's up with railroad ties? How far do we space those apart for this kind of train that's going to run on this track? Let's do some research here. Bridges, how do we lay a proper foundation of tracks? There's all these different parts to consider. keeping your nose to the grindstone and being a stoic and cutting out all emotions and monk mode and all this top-down meditation, which is essentially amounts to suppression, or no, suppression if you're lucky, really repression. You can do this and it can work. But why would Ryan Holiday, this smart guy, write this article to his father? Well, I mean, just the title it's just so pathetic. I'm sorry, like it is. Dear Dad, please don't vote for Donald Trump this time. Dear Dad, please don't vote for Donald Trump this time. Again, not a Trump supporter. I never voted for him. I voted for, some weird party because I'm a weirdo. So it's not about Trump. If this is, please don't vote for Biden this time, it would be the same thing. And he goes through this whole list of, here's why Donald Trump is a bad guy. Oh, look, he lies. Oh, look, his family benefits from him. Oh, look, or from him being president, obviously. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago with Hunter Biden. Oh, look, he, said this thing about this. He said this one unseemly thing, he's bringing up these old, grab you by the, the pussy rumor, which he did say, of course. But again, on this show, we hold, just as official. And again, not a Trump supporter. I don't know how many freaking times I'm going to say them. I'm going to ruin the show by saying I'm not a Trump supporter. But I'm just really trying to stress that it isn't about that. Grab her by the pussy was clearly his astonished reaction at female sexuality. He's like, I can't believe I could do something as male sexist and, rapey as that. It's really a feminist position. Trump is showing his feminism there. I can't believe I could do something like that to a woman and it would actually turn her on. And I think a lot of guys, and I think this is important because a lot of guys just don't understand female sexuality on this level. When I started understanding female sexuality on this level, which is essentially the truth that women are about, 76 times more sexual than men are, I was about 20 or 21. But I didn't really internalize. It took so long for me to internalize that. And so many points of experience to really get that. And even now, I don't know if I really get that. Maybe I'll get it more in 10 years than I get now. But it's just amazing to me. And, we hold up women in this culture as, like these beautiful creatures. Which they are, but I don't mean like beautiful, like, oh, you're beautiful and better if you don't care about sex. But these creatures that don't really seem to care about sex. And it's like this constant awakening that guys go to, which I'm not criticizing society for doing that, for holding up women in that kind of light. It makes sense. I don't want to get into it now. There's already too many freaking tangents in this show. So there's this gradual awakening up to of guys of, oh man, women are really sexual. Man, I think they really like having sex. I like having sex too, but they really like it. I mostly like the fact that I'm having it, right, as a dude. They really like it, and you can just go up to them and grab them in the crotch, and they may like it. It may actually turn them on. More than if you were to make a sexual advancement in a more PC way. Oh, what's going on? I'm going to bond with my buddy, Billy Bush. Why am I keeping him up? Because freaking, it keeps getting brought up by the anti-Trump side. Really, the grabber by the pussy was all of society being unable to come to terms with female sexuality, which, maybe it makes sense. And that's just going to happen. And if we're going to have a functioning society, we really can't let that female sexuality out of the bag because it's just going to overtake everything. Okay, fine, we can make that argument. But the point is like, here is this guy who promotes this philosophy of Stoicism, right? Tune out of your emotions. Don't get irrational. Force yourself to be rational. If you're constantly thinking about a girl and you texted her and she hasn't texted you back for 17 hours and all you can freaking think about is to look at your phone and care about what she's going to text back if she ever texts back, or what you could possibly text her again, to get her to text you back. Just don't think about it. No, don't you see that's irrational? Just tune out. Wait, why do you even care about having needs in the first place? Who are you to care? What, you think your mind is capable of dealing with reality? Who are you to think that? Who are you to want things? Don't you see that the burgeoning Roman Empire is taking us over? I totally lost that train of thought from the interview. It doesn't matter. Look, the burgeoning Roman Empire is taking over. Just tune out. Who are you to have needs? And you can do that for a while, and it can make you very efficient, I'm sure, in the short term. I mean, I do it too. Like, if I have a big project to get done, I can just tune out for a couple days. And it works. That's great. But you don't base a freaking philosophy for your life on that idea of, oh man, I really focused and prepared really well for this midterm or this paper that was due, and that worked. So I'm going to extrapolate that out and use that method, use that way of living on my entire life. You don't want to freaking do that, because you end up writing articles like, "Dear Dad, please don't vote for this politician who's mean." Don't you see? If you do not manage your needs, we talk about this a lot, but this is a great example of this. If you do not manage your needs, if you do not honor those, create a shrine to them, pray to them, honor your anger. You think there's a difference between God and anger? I don't. Really honor that. Put that first in your life. If you don't do that, you will end up being needy. This is the shadow side. This is what Jung talks about with the shadow. Not that it's inevitably there and it's always compensating for anything good we do. It doesn't mean that. If you deny certain aspects of yourself, if you deny how steel works, if you deny that you need to make steel in this foundry and put railroad ties a distance apart, certain numbers of meters apart, then your train's gonna fall off the track. If you do not honor, if you do not pay heed to your psychology and how it works, which a big part of that, well, I don't know, a big part, but half of your emotional life is anger, my needs, how do I get them met, what's important to me, how do I go into this situation, get my needs met, how do I empathize with the other person, how do I get their needs met? That's how you live, right? I mean, that is, and it's not cultural. I mean, it is hopefully, but culture is the. And I was just reading 93. There's a great Hugo quotation where Bill Van is talking to Seymour Dane about their difference between their two political philosophies. Oh yeah, culture is the exaltation of nature. I thought that was a great line. Culture is the exaltation of nature. So this comes from your nature, from how you work, and just a subscribing to a philosophy created by slaves, by literal slaves, about how they best tuned out from the world. That doesn't tell you how your psychology works. That doesn't tell you. You gotta at least look at what is going on with you. Otherwise, your lack of putting your own needs first, you're going to come off as very needy. Because what does that do when you put your own needs first? I mean, that's how you cause separation, not detachment from other people. But I don't want you to be detached and tuned out from your dad, but separated. He's his own man. You're your own man. You can disagree about politics. You can vote for a guy who has orange face, and it can be okay. The other thing that happens, I mean, we'll probably get back to this, but now I'm thinking about this other thought that I had, which relates to something that Sam Harris said on his podcast, I think this past week. I didn't listen to the podcast, but there's this quotation from him going around Twitter. And the quotation, I don't know exactly what it was, but it was something to the effect, like, it was Sam Harris's awakening. Like, he was wakening up to, I kind of see Trump's appeal. I could see how somebody could vote for Trump, something to the effect of his explanation, which I think is true. I don't think it's the entire truth, but I think that's partly true. Trump has no shame. He has no shame. He has no sanctimony. And then the left is all about that. Sanctimony and shame. You're wrong. Kind of implicitly, we're not going to come out and tell you you're wrong for being white, but there's this thing called white supremacy, and you probably do implicitly support it. Not that there's anything wrong with being white. Right? No, we're not saying that. We're just saying if you adhere to these views, and you pretty much adhere to these views by existing, unless you are actively overturning white supremacy, right? But anyways, it's all this religious connotation, sanctimony, holier than thou. And Trump has none of that. And I think that's true. I think there's lots of reasons why people like Trump. That is one good reason. And everybody is holding up like, hey, Sam Harris, he gets it. Oh, this is great. And I'm thinking, man, it took you 4 freaking years, or really 5, 5 freaking years. I mean, when did Trump announce his presidency? Probably in 2015 sometime, right? It took you 5 years to see the appeal of Trump, Dude, what's up, Sam Harris? I thought you were a psychologist, or, neuroscience, which is, right? I mean, that's psychology pretending to be science. It's not really psychology. You may get there one day with better technology. By the way, I was just reading something that Jung wrote. I just really like when what I say lines up with something that he says, something I haven't heard him say anything about, but he talks about the idea of, this is in the beginning of volume 8, structure and dynamic of the psyche. And he talks about the possibility of psychology ever going from a qualitative profession to a quantitative. And he essentially says in no uncertain terms, yeah, it may get there one day, but we need better, I think this term is tools of insight. We need, essentially what I say, we need better technology. We get there, but right now, and sorry, fMRI machine is not it. It's great for convincing juries of something, but look at those patterns in the brain. Wow, well, that's blood flow. Oh, that means something. But that's not it. That is a red herring. So, Sam Harris is implicitly being praised for having this insight about Trump, and I'm thinking, yeah, it took you 5 years, dude. Oh yeah, you're a psychologist, not a real psychologist, but a psychologist regardless. Isn't that kind of your profession, is to understand where people are coming from? To understand, even if you disagree with somebody, it makes sense. If Trump doesn't make sense, I don't care how much you disagree with him, and I definitely disagree with a lot of things that he was saying throughout his first campaign. Or some of the things he was saying was good, but in the presidency, it turned out to be a lot of talk. No surprise there. And I definitely disagreed with a lot of it, but if you can't empathize, if you can't see how this would be totally appealing, and not in any kind of condescending way, like, oh, I could see how from your sad, Midwestern perspective, this could be appealing. No, you got to really get it. You got to really feel it, If you don't see that, then you just don't get psychology. You're a bad psychologist. You've been looking at too many fMRI machine researches and not enough freaking philosophy books, which is what psychology is based on. So where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so this is what Ryan Holiday, he just still can't get how somebody could vote for Trump. It's like a real lack of empathy, really. I mean, pretty fresh coming from me, but come on. If you don't study World War II and Hitler and Stalin and why these guys rose to power, get with it. And you don't just get it, right? You really feel it. You really feel what somebody must have gone through. Hey, here's an idea. If you're coming at the Weimar Republic with the idea of, hey, if we don't get rid of these people, then it's going to be the end of Germany. It's going to be the end of our rightful pre-World War I Germany. I don't think Hitler even went further back. But again, that goes back to that myth that Hitler was going to take over the world. That was never what he wanted. Now, maybe he would have eventually done that. You can make that argument. Like communism's foreign policy is never to take over the world. Well, no, it is. Actually, never. I take that back. It's different. Communists explicitly say, Marx explicitly says this is going to be a world revolution. But if you don't really get what somebody was going through, what somebody who eventually joined the Nazi Party is going through, really understand. I mean, this is something really helpful that I think Jordan Peterson talks about. Then, I'm sorry, you got to work on that. You got to work on developing your identity. You got to work on putting the focus on yourself, your capital S self. We don't have to get into how to do that now, maybe later. You got to focus on that, so you can have that kind of viewpoint. But it's clear that Ryan Holiday, Sam Harris, they just haven't made these crucial separations. I don't care how many, how disciplined you are, how many books about Seneca you read, how many Jocko Willink, how many David Goggins, motivational YouTube channels you watch. If you don't understand the structure of steel, it's not going to matter. If you don't understand the structure of psychology and you need to go through these archetypal experiences of often conscious father separation psychologically. Oh, my dad died, or moved across the country. No, you got to separate psychologically. Doesn't matter if he's dead or you put him out of your mind. You just ruled him out of your life, or what's that called? Tune somebody out. Having an interesting time thinking of words this morning. It gets baffling to you, Communism is baffling to you. I think that was what was so great about that Mr. Jones movie. It was clearly an anti-communist movie, but there was a couple lines in there where like, oh man, you're making a great case for communism. And you got to understand what people, like why people would put somebody through that starvation, through that planned starvation, a Holocaust. That's what it was. Or a genocide. Not a Holocaust in a sense. But why would somebody do that? These people aren't evil. They're not. They see Nazism and they see communism as an antidote to Nazism. This is their only view. Like if your only view is, okay, we got to get rid of these 6 million people so Germany can have a future for the sake of Germany, then you make that decision. Of course, that's what you do. Now, I think the premise of that is totally wrong, but if that's where you're coming from, that makes sense. If you had friends who died in the overtake of the Nazi Party in Germany in 1933, then, and you defect, right, and you go to Soviet Russia, and you see communism as the antithesis of Nazism. Of course it wasn't, but given what we were, given the ideas and the climate at the time, it was difficult for particularly educated people to see them as actually the same thing, or just really different aspects of the same tyrannical nature. Then yeah, you support communism. And if that means planned starvation of 5 million people, 7 million, estimates up to 10 million people over the course of a year, which, I mean, that's the crazy thing about Holodomor, is it took a year. I mean, how long did, Mao could kill way more people, but that was, extended out over a couple decades. It was just absolutely horrible. Why would you support that? Because it means no Nazism. That's what it means to you. And you got to empathize with that. And you got to empathize with it to see how you're doing it too. Hopefully not supporting Nazism or communism, but you got to see how you're doing it too. With your dad. Right? How you're not empathizing with your dad, because to empathize with your dad would maybe mean something about you, but these are the issues that you work through. These are the issues that you deal with when you're separating from your dad, which is essentially entails, right? How do I take what I'm hiding from my dad, what my dad doesn't know about me, in a sense, facts about me, my life, my emotions. What do I not know about my dad? That's another thing. How do I learn more about him? What was his upbringing like? What was it like for him? What was his relationship with his dad? What does he know about his grandparents, your great grandparents, who you probably haven't met? What's going on? But you don't do that. I mean, that requires empathy. And again, it's so ridiculous. I'm the freaking guy who has to come on and tell everybody about empathy, but that's how bad it's gotten. I mean, you think the election and the fighting's bad. Well, maybe it's related, right? Yeah, the fact that somebody would vote for Trump is baffling to these guys is, well, it's not baffling. It makes sense. But it's understandable. You got to see everything in this world as understandable. It's, there are a lot of good things to that. There's some maybe bad things to it too. It leads to you being tuned out, but that's okay. I think that is, in a sense, a self-correcting mechanism. Because the understanding, right, just that process that makes you more understanding will eventually get you out of that being tuned out, which could happen. Because everything makes sense. Yeah, it's like, it's fun to be in fights when you're really coming at it from an understanding, empathetic viewpoint. And I don't just mean empathetic, oh, I feel what you're going through, this surface feeling, natural thing that happens if you're not too autistic. I'm talking like a real deep understanding. I guess it makes it difficult to stand up for yourself sometimes because you're just tuned into other people and you go, yeah, that makes sense. I understand why you'd be pissed. Yeah, I get it. So maybe it leads to that. But again, the mechanism that makes you understanding is a mechanism that is eventually going to tune you in. So speaking of, fundamental issues and maybe being tuned out, and what's a more fundamental issue? So in psychology now, given all this, given what I'm saying, well, let me go back a step. I mean, what's similar about Sam Harris and Ryan Holiday? These Stoicism. I mean, Sam Harris doesn't specifically talk about Stoicism, but go read his book on psychology. Go read his book on meditation. It's all about tuning out, right? The goal there, the very Eastern influence view of meditation, is to tune out, to not have thoughts, or to have a thought and then just watch it go away. This means nothing about me. Have an emotion and feel it and just watch it go away because it means nothing about you. Right? Having this kind of attitude, this top-down, I am going to create a stable train track by my will alone, just by tuning out thoughts of the steel not being, of the right mixture. I'm just going to tune that out, and I think this is really the silent takeover in psychology. So, we talk about the SJW takeover, multiculturalism, how that's been a huge part of psychology, and the EPA endorsing anti-racism policies, and endorsing all the BLM doctrines in a sense, which is Marxism, right? It's Marxism with good marketing. And we have the EPA endorsing this. And, the question is really, you can't follow what the EPA says anymore, really, and be a good psychologist. I mean, just like, look, this is nothing new. I mean, in 1960s, if you were a practicing therapist, that the DSM-3 was out, or maybe it was the 2 at that time, I forget, but homosexuality was a mental disorder. It was like something was wrong with you. So what, do you think every therapist was, treating a homosexual patient like they had some mental issue? No. I'm sure there are some there who, even back in the 60s, and like, this is kind of BS. It's like, yeah, I can see where you're going with this APA or DSM-2 or 3, and it's like, no, it's BS. It's not really a mental disorder. There's a lot of things wrong with that. But, they just didn't pay attention. And, you can still be a good therapist, but you just can't pay attention to anything the APA says. But I think even more significant takeover of psychology is the Stoicism-based philosophy, cognitive behavioral therapy. This is kind of an outcrop of treating psychology like a science, like a hard science. If you have a thought, don't worry about it. These things mean nothing. Let's just submit yourself to these practices, very much like I'm sure Ryan Holiday did. Submit yourself to these practices that we're not really basing on reality. I mean, we're basing on research, but there's a lot of issues with that research, a lot of confounding variables. I'm not going to get into that now. Just let's suffice it to say there's issues with the research. I'm sure I'll talk about some other time. But not reality, not on the nature of what a train track is. And I think something like this leads to the SJW takeover. I think very much like Ryan Holiday's article here, Dear Dad, please don't vote for Trump, how this is clearly the shadow side of his Stoicism coming out. The philosophy that tells you your needs don't matter. In a sense, that's what it is. I mean, I understand that Ryan Holiday has this interpretation of what Stoicism is, and it's about justice and competence. It's like, well, yeah, a lot of things are about that. That's nothing fundamental to Stoicism. You go back and read, and I don't want to pull this card, but how much of Stoicism have you actually read? How long did you go throughout your 20s without having a girlfriend? Because I went quite a while. I read a bunch of Stoicism, so I don't know. I really question to the extent that he's really read it, or does he have this kind of self-help 20th century, pull yourself up from the bootstraps kind of philosophy that he kind of sees some reflection in Stoicism, and there's good marketing there. That's ancient philosophy, and this guy's named Seneca, so he must know what he's talking about. Ooh, Marcus Aurelius, he sounds important. what was I saying? Oh yeah, so the dark side of that, of this philosophy that tells you have no need to tune out from reality, nothing's ultimately in your control anyway. The dark side of this is going to be a guy who's really needy towards his dad. So needy that he freaking cares who his dad votes for. Sad. So that is the dark side of Stoicism. Sam Harris's dark side of his own version of Stoicism. His is more like a Buddhist influence, but of course, if you get my notes, you know what is the first thought in Western civilization influenced by the East? Stoicism, right? They got those ideas from the East, so there's a lot of overlap here. So Sam Harris's Buddhism, like you're just floating mind up here, you're not in your body, you're this floating mind, a lot of mind-body dichotomy in there. His dark side of all this self-awareness, just being aware, meditation. His dark side is after 5 years, he can finally see one sliver of appeal in Trump. And I think the dark side, the shadow response to a very similar kind of philosophy that's been overtaking academia for the past 50, 60 years is BLM. And you go into a therapist's office, you're having difficult emotions, and he gives you ways to, in a sense, argue with the emotion. Not understanding where it's coming from. I mean, there's validation in there, that's good, but not understanding where it's coming from, in a sense, treating it like the Stoics treat it. Like Sam Harris treats it, like Ryan Holiday treats it, as just this thing that it's there. And it's not that you don't pay attention to it. I mean, this could definitely be way more unhealthy. It's not that you don't pay attention to it, but it's this thing, excuse me, it's this thing that ultimately doesn't matter. I have a booger in my nose now, it feels like I do. It's this thing that ultimately doesn't really matter. So of course, the dark side of that is going to be, oh man, here's a guy who just doesn't understand at all. And that's what BLM is. Like, how do we have this philosophy that's dominated academia for so long? Oh, you have a negative thought, change the thought. You are implicitly in control of everything, and you're like in control of you. You're not in control of the world, you're in control of you. Yet there's also this total acceptance of this BLM, anti-racism, SJW, critical race theory movement. It's like, yeah, you just haven't paid attention to emotions for 60 years. This movement comes in that's full of emotion. And by the way, that emotion is totally justified. I am not in any way disabusing the validity of that emotion. But it's emotion without structure. So this comes in and it's like fills in this huge vacuum that you've been paying attention to. Like the dry sponge just sucks it up. You're making yourself a dry sponge by subscribing to these Stoicism top-down cognitive philosophies. And you're a dry sponge for cringiness was what happens there. So I think that's the real problem with academia. Everybody's paying attention to the BLM, and why is that the real problem? Because it's more fundamental. Because we work on the CBT Stoicism issue, in a sense, the connection issue, there's still going to be philosophies like BLM and the Marxism that inspired it, but the extent that it's just like a conflagration is taking over academia. I mean, it is everywhere. I mean, like I said, I'm back in a doctorate program now, and it's quite honestly disgusting. Totally understandable. It makes total sense, but the extent that these ideas are just accepted, I mean, I guess it's nothing new. It's still kind of baffling, and I can't believe it. It's like female sexuality. You can see it. You can see it when you're 20, but you may not get it really till you're 26. And even then, you probably don't get it. I'm not saying I really get it. Not that there's anything to get, but really see the power of it. Just to see the awesome force that is female sexuality. Yeah, you go out on a date and it goes well, and you text her, hey, good to hang out with you, and she doesn't text you back for 17 hours. You better believe that's going to mess you up. I hope it does. It shows you're alive. It shows you care about something. It shows you're still, at least implicitly, trying to tune in with the world, unlike Ryan Holiday and Sam Harris, right? But again, it just comes back to that. I don't care how disciplined you are. I don't care how seriously you take your life. I don't care how many books you read. If you do not look at the nature of your steel, at the nature of your psychology, how it works, the process you need to go through to become more aware. It's not just, you don't just make a decision to be more aware. How do you submit yourself to this process? Well, you got to learn how your psychology works. It's really a process that we need to submit ourselves to. And there's a lot of, let's see, what time is it here? Oh geez. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going kind of long. And I guess I'll end it here. This is the process that we need to submit ourselves to. What was I talking about a couple of weeks ago? But it's in a sense the process that Jung lays out, that I delineate in my book and my theories on Man's Guide to Psychology. But the process of what was it? Oh yeah, dreams. I mean, in a sense, Jung's take on it is look at your dreams. That's in a sense just looking at your unconscious. Look at the archetypes, right? What is an archetypal way that you function? How must your psychology function based on what you are? You must have this Oedipus complex, Ryan freaking Holiday. You must have this parental complex. It makes sense given the nature, given specifically the sexual dimorphism of humans. It's gonna come up. How do you deal with older, stronger, wealthier, more powerful men? Do you just say you don't care about that? Well, you better not, because it's going to come up for you, and it's going to come up in a really needy, kind of cringy way. And then look at your anima, right? Dreams are unconscious, archetypes, anima. How do you integrate your emotions? And then from here, you get the self, the religion of the self, the capital S self, as Jung talks about. Everybody, all the right-leaning people I follow on Twitter, they're all complaining to some degree, we got rid of religion. Society's sick, culture is sick because we got rid of religion. It's like, no. It's not because you got rid of religion. It's not because nobody believes literally that Jesus died for our sins. Well, I guess we do, right? But just much less. And even the people who do, I would argue, and I really got this view from Jung, he would argue, hey, you don't really. Not like somebody believed before Darwin. You just don't really believe that Jesus literally died for your sins to the extent that, if you're living in 1800s in England, that is just like, you couldn't imagine, right? You couldn't imagine somebody living and not thinking that. So where am I going with this? We got rid of religion. Oh, it's so terrible. It's not coming back, right? That's what I was talking about earlier this week. It's not coming back. Religion is not coming back. But that's not the problem. The problem isn't that we did away with religion, but we haven't kept going. We haven't found a new religion. We haven't found a new way to express archetypal symbolism in our psychology. We haven't found a new way to connect with something that is, at least on the surface, higher than ourselves. That's the problem. You're also going to complain because the church you go to is overrun by feminism and BLM ideas and all this Marxist stuff. Like, of course it is. Of course it's overrun by that because you've been stagnant. Of course it's going to be overrun by these stagnant ideas. You got to keep going. You got to keep moving. We have to create a religion of the self, not of narcissism. I know when I say that, you're thinking narcissism. That does not mean self. Narcissism is really the absence of a self. It is no boundary. Somebody who's narcissist is going to have a very difficult time disconnecting and separating from their father. Not disconnecting, not detaching, separating in a healthy way from their father. Or actually, in the process of overcoming their narcissism, there's probably going to be some father separation in there. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to go for, especially in the time when everybody's freaking out over the election. I would just argue this is just another indication that, in a sense, we've taken this religious function and we haven't improved it. We haven't expanded it. Which is what it's been doing. We've been doing that with this religious function for a long time. I mean, that's what Christianity was. It was the next iteration of that. And then it changed, and then it changed a couple more times, and we had the Reformation, it kept changing. But I think, didn't I? Who was I talking about that with? I feel like I just said that this past week. Healthy psychology would be the proper end manifestation of the Reformation. So let's look at that. And specifically to do that, I think we got to look at how your emotions work. I mean, Jung essentially did it, but, I'm here to, why is Jeff Bezos worth $150 billion, which I think he deserves? I know you can criticize Bezos, and, the more afraid we are, the richer Bezos gets, which is true probably to some extent. But is that Bezos' fault, or is that your fault for being afraid? Why is Bezos so rich, right? I mean, he didn't invent the book. He didn't invent writing or bookstores. He didn't invent the convenience store. What do? He just made that all really freaking simple. Just so stupidly simple. You want this book? Hey, yeah, you want this book? You know what it was like getting books in the 90s? It was kind of a pain in the butt. Now it's, hey, you want this book? You don't even have to know the title. You have to know maybe one word in the title and the author's wife's maiden name or something. You just type this in, and it's the first thing that comes up. You click on that link in this search, and then but no, you don't have to click on the link anymore. You just have to go buy now. So it's not even add to cart. You just do one click, and then you wait 2 days. Oh, you don't want to wait 2 days? Well, get this e-reader. I know you don't like reading books on a iPad. No, this isn't it, right? This is this special interface that looks like ink. It's really amazing, and it makes it even easier to read a book, especially when there's footnotes. I mean, anybody who says they can't read on a Kindle, I'm like, do you even like reading? I just can't imagine that. On an iPad, I totally get it. On your iPhone, I totally get it. Yeah, you don't want to wait 2 days for a book. Well, just get this e-reader. Click this. You just have to click this link. Just put your credit card in, so you don't have to do anything. And it's probably going to be 99 cents. You can go get the Iliad for probably 99 cents, and it goes right to the Kindle. And you just click this one thing, right? He didn't invent anything. He just made it so simple, so easy. And that's what I want to do in part with your psychology. Jung laid out these ideas. There are some epistemological flaws in Jung. We don't have to get into it now. But he was aware of them, at least. And you can always sense the struggle. Like, he did not have the epistemology to keep up with his psychological views. Because, he didn't really read Aristotle that much. He really didn't understand how to completely disabuse the mind-body dichotomy and the empiricism-idealism dichotomy. So he didn't have, the epistemology to keep up with that. Where am I going with this? Boy, guys, I think I'm kind of tired. I'm going to end this anyways. Yeah, so, that's what we do here, right? We would just take what Jung did, add some better epistemology, completely disabuse the mind-body dichotomy, completely disabuse the theory-practice, abstract, concrete, universal, particular, mind-body dichotomy. We completely disabuse that in our psychology and show you, in a sense, exactly how emotions work. So when you do need to separate from your dad, like Jeff Bezos, right? This is what you say. This is how you say it. This is what you talk about after. And this is the takeaway. Generally speaking, that there's this broad takeaway that we all have from therapy. If you don't want to talk about it with your dad, write it first because it's uncomfortable. That's why we have therapy, right? So get in touch, animusempire.com/schedule. We do free consultations. I got your questions here, guys. I got them. I see them. I will get to them. And just, it's been a little bit hectic around here this week. But I'll get to those questions. But I want more questions. Animus@animusempire.com. I'll leave it there, guys. Thank you for watching. And I wish you all the joy and pain that comes from separating from your father.